The book I chose to read was Reading Lolita in Tehran. The following presentation will give you a summary of the book, the struggles the characters face, and how this all relates to multicultural education and EDU 604. Reading Lolita in Tehran is written and narrated by Azar Nafisi. Azar grew up in Iran and eventually becomes a professor at the University of Tehran, where she teaches various works of literature. Azar has a unique upbringing in Iran that is much different from that of her students. Azar grew up in a time where more political freedom took place. Azar was able to dress as she pleased in public as well as pursue an education. Once she begins her journey as a professor at the university, things start to change from a governmental standpoint, which soon trickles into all aspects of life. The Islamic Republic begins to reign supreme over the people. Men start to have greater control and respect in society. Women are required to wear robes concealing their bodies and hair, and education becomes more political than ever before. Azar works tirelessly to challenge her students with Western literature, which many find controversial and against the Islamic Republic. The universities start to be controlled by the students, where professors are expelled when students do not agree or support their teaching strategies or materials. Azar ultimately ends up leaving the University of Tehran because of her internal struggles to subdue to a political regime she does not support. Azar ends up recruiting 7 former students for a private reading group that will take place in her home. These women meet once a week in secret and discuss forbidden works of literature. In the process, they also open up about their personal lives and struggles they face in a politically charged society. The reading group becomes a safe haven for Azar's students who dream of a freedom Azar experienced herself before the regime took place. The only thing that stood out to me as far as Azar's teaching position that I would have done differently would be to pick less controversial books in my classroom. I feel like this put students in a position that Azar really didn't like being put in herself. Azar mentions that she didn't believe or support the idea that she should have to wear a veil, but that this was forced on her by the government. And similarly, with the controversial books, her students were also forced into material that they may not have agreed with, and that would be one suggestion I would change for her teaching strategy. The next connection to the course that is present in Reading Lolita in Tehran is her teaching strategy. Teaching in a very political society, Azar implements principles of cultural competence and cultural responsiveness in her teaching, which directly relate to multicultural education. Students come to class with different upbringings. Some may be more political or religious than others, so it is important for educators to recognize these differences. Multicultural education supports the idea that all students and their cultural backgrounds and experiences should be recognized in schools and seen as valuable in education. To make this possible, educators must be aware of cultural differences, values, and beliefs. In doing so, the classroom will become more open and accepting for students from diverse backgrounds by simply recognizing their needs and beliefs. Azar displays both knowledge and respect for the men and women in her class who practice Islam and abide by the rules of the Republic. Azar knows that men cannot look at her directly when having a conversation with her, and she does not question them on this or make them feel bad for not doing so. When things get more political and students and teachers are being expelled at school for going against authority, Azar does not force her students to speak their minds in class, as she knows this may be controversial. Azar allows students to come to her after class or write their concerns and assignments rather than jeopardizing her students' abilities to attend school at all. The next course connection that is present in the book is the importance of addressing gender inequalities, especially in regards to making schools truly multicultural institutions. Confronting and addressing racism and ethnic differences are crucial to creating a culturally accepting school environment, but more factors are involved in making this possible. Addressing sexist beliefs and behaviors, gender roles, and gender diversity benefit everyone involved in our schools. In Reading Lolita in Tehran, women are seen as inferior to men. One of the characters, Sanaz, is constantly monitored by her older brother, who has control over her life and her actions as if she belongs to him. In school and any public place, women are required to dress in robes, and their bodies are to be hidden at all times. These boundaries keep women at the university from feeling free and developing as individuals. They cannot travel without permission from their husbands or fathers and lead very controlled lives. Azar challenges such gender inequalities in her reading group each week. The students are allowed to shed their robes in the comfort of her home, and they are allowed to express themselves in a way they cannot in the outside world. Azar also challenges the government in regards to even having to wear the veil at school and in public. Had these gender inequalities been addressed at a greater level in the novel, Azar and her students would have been able to chase after their dreams and live a lifestyle they support rather than one they are forced into. Breaking down gender boundaries makes more choices available for everyone and eliminates the limitations that gender places on us in today's society. The women in the novel would not have been forced underground to study literature had gender freedom been more equal. Additionally, the University of Tehran would not have lost valuable staff if these conditions were present. Environmental issues are also present in reading Lolita in Tehran, and such issues also mirror the focus on environmental causes of the achievement gap that are covered in this course. The definition of community can be seen as something as simple as geographical dimensions or as complex as social aspects. The reason that community is brought up is because this directly ties into our environment and how this impacts our ability to achieve in schools. When thinking about community, safety also comes into play, and this is really what made me tie this into the book. In the book, Azar describes the instability that occurs during the Islamic Republic. She talks about bombings taking place and being without power. This does not include the day-to-day fears that women face about dressing properly and obeying the rules defined for them by the government. Living in unsafe environments within the community directly impacts a student's ability to perform academically, and this is especially true in the book. Ozar herself is forced out of the university because of instability in her country. Her students have to lie about where they are during the weekly readings, and because the books they're reading about are forbidden, it makes it even harder to share their knowledge with the community. If community and safety were present in Tehran, Azar and her students would have been able to succeed and continue to work in academia. Instead, many of them were forced underground, some were even sent to jail or fled the country entirely. The book presents two key implications for society. Political freedom and accessibility to a quality education are essential in creating productive societies where all members can thrive. Iran forced all citizens to follow the strict rules and regulations of the regime, whether they agreed with them or not. This created a lot of uncertainty in day-to-day activities and also a lot of fear. Women were afraid to leave their homes for fear of being ridiculed for the way they dressed. Educators were ruled by their students and lived in fear of being able to keep their jobs, and regular class assembly was not guaranteed due to riots or assemblies. With such factors present in both communities and school systems, it is almost impossible for students to learn. Creating safe havens in schools is extremely important for society as a whole. If students do not feel safe or even welcome at schools, they are less likely to achieve to their fullest potential. This has a direct impact on the amount of productive members in society who move on to work and lead successful careers. The biggest takeaway from this book that I received is that education is really a luxury. While we live in a different society than what was described in the book, education is still not accessible for everyone. Many barriers still exist today that prevent students from attending college. Students from poor neighborhoods or families that cannot always afford school supplies are at a disadvantage because they cannot be as successful without the necessary supplies, and this trickles down the line, which impacts their ability to graduate from high school or enter college. Students from different racial backgrounds also face struggles within schools, such as institutional racism or simply not being accepted by their peers, and gender inequalities are still present. This book gave me a greater appreciation for my own education. This book also showed me the importance of fighting for what you believe in, regardless of how unobtainable it may seem. A suggestion that I have for further research in this area would be for more information on education from countries experiencing extreme political or war zone conditions. While I do understand that education probably isn't very developed in these regions, it would still be helpful to see some data on political strife and the impacts it has on student achievement. I think this would be helpful, especially in comparing the material to the book, as the characters faced extreme political strife while trying to obtain an education and become successful. I really enjoyed reading this book, and I hope to get the chance to read some of the other books that you guys have chosen. But overall, I really enjoyed this assignment, and I hope you enjoyed this recap of reading Lolita in Tehran.